Greg Delaney. Take one, slate.
So why faith? Why should faith-based organizations, churches, faith-based nonprofits, why should they engage people with substance use disorder? It's a good question, but it has a pretty good answer. There's a gentleman named Degerhardt that says it this way. He says, evidence-based studies point to the instrumental contribution of faith to substance use prevention and recovery. A large majority of those cases show that religious and spiritual beliefs and practice lead to lower levels of substance use. That is compelling. I think it brings us to the place of answering the question as to why faith-based organizations, why faith-based entities and solutions would be important to a community's response to substance use disorder. And that's what I hope to kind of flesh out today in this first Masterclass in association with our friends from Foundations for Recovery. It's why faith. And I like what my friend Kelly Moselle from down at the Southeastern ATTC Technical Center said at a conference here recently. He said, faith-based communities are uniquely designed to offer a place of repentance and honest self-assessment without judgment. But what he really says is, it's most compelling, is this. He says that congregations provide a caring community. There are several who work in this particular field that have made the distinction and have made the comment that addiction is a disease of isolation that requires a community response. Kelly reinforces that, and faith-based communities can be uniquely designed to be that caring community, to provide a safe place for someone who is seeking assistance with their substance use disorder, but also providing a safe and caring community for that person that's walking out a pathway of recovery. And so that helps us to really kind of build on this idea of why faith, and I also lean on Pastor Tony Evans, who makes this statement. He said, government, well, it can run and fund programs, but it can't love, it can't show compassion. Our faith, however, is designed to have social implications, he says, not just heavenly ones. He says that the spiritual and the social must be connected. And I think that brings us to this place of asking the question, okay, then why faith? What is the compelling event that's going around us that would encourage us as faith leaders, as faith-based entities, to want to step into the space of supporting someone who's dealing with a substance use disorder? And the compelling event is this: the prevalence of addiction, the prevalence of the loss of life to addiction has never been greater than it is right now in our communities. Just this past year, over 90,000 people lost their life to drug overdose. We've seen increases in every community across the country. Every state has experienced a rise in overdose death between 2019 and 2020, and we actually believe that 2021, when the numbers come in, will be worse. In the community that we're actually preparing this Masterclass for, that of Clark County in the Las Vegas area, they've seen increases to fentanyl overdose in the past year alone of over 194%. That is a compelling argument for us as faith leaders, me as a pastor, you who are listening to this, to be considering how can we be a part of a solution? How can we help? And I lean on the idea of Brennan Manning to kind of bring home this point of why faith. Brennan Manning was a person who dealt with a substance use disorder, but was a pastor as well. And he made this comment. He said, the greatest need for our time is the church, looking at the church as the big C, the church to become what it has seldom been. Loving others, regardless of religion or culture, pouring our lives out into a life of service, offering hope to a frightened world. But what I really like what he says here is us becoming faith leaders, faith communities, faith-based organizations, becoming the alternative to the existing arrangement. We've just heard a little bit about the existing arrangement. All of those folks losing their lives to overdose. And you're going to learn in subsequent classes that this deal, this addiction, this substance use challenge is something that is treatable, that recovery is a reality, and that if we intervene as faith communities, we can make a difference and see that number of overdoses go down. So what you see on this particular slide in this diagram is something that they call the recovery-oriented system of care, and it was actually created by SAMHSA. And SAMHSA at the federal level kind of sets all the drug policy when it comes to substance use disorder, treatment, recovery. And when they came out with this particular picture, I think something is of significant note. You see the arrow there that points that they invited faith-based communities to the table to be a part of helping someone dealing with a substance use disorder find recovery. So we have been a part of the solution in their mind for a long period of time, yet we have been reluctant to take our seat at the table. And what we're hoping to do with these classes and with the program that's coming alongside of this with our friends from Foundations for Recovery in Las Vegas is this. It is for us to find our way to the table, but also find our way to the table as educated, as enlightened, and as equipped as possible in order to help those who are dealing with substance use disorder find recovery. And when we look at substance use, sometimes we get kind of caught up in the symptomatic nature of it. We get caught up with words like heroin and fentanyl and some of those things that we don't understand. But at the root of most substance use issues is this fear and isolation. As a person in long-term recovery, I never felt more alone than when I was dealing with my substance use issue. And Brené Brown makes an interesting comment when it comes to this. She makes this statement. She says, there's a deep sense of love and a belonging that is an irreducible need of all people because we are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love and to be loved. And when those needs aren't met, she makes some interesting observations. She says we ache, we fall apart, we numb, we get sick. And as we kind of move through these master classes, you're going to learn a little bit about substance use disorder as a disease. You're going to learn a little bit about recovery as a pathway of wellness and healing on a continuum. So this idea of getting sick from not being able to belong corresponds and ties in. And if we as faith leaders and we as faith-based community support organizations can step into that space and be that effective connection, then maybe we can turn the tide on some of that sickness and that aching and that hurting and that desire to numb. Gabe Armati says it this way. He says that addiction often originates in a human being's desperate attempt to solve a problem, the problem of emotional pain, stress, loss of connection, loss of control. In short, it's a forlorn attempt to solve the problem of human pain. Hence, his mantra, the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And what's interesting to me is faith-based organizations, churches, synagogues, mosques, and others have always been a place where people could bring some of the burdens of life and bring them to a caring community that can help them understand how to deal with them, how to connect to a higher power, if you will, to help navigate the challenge. And this is no different. Substance use disorder is, I think, one of the biggest mission fields. Those that are facing it, one of the biggest mission fields that we have in our community. And so us being able to become a place of caring and compassion and connection and being in a place where we have the right tools and the right equipping and the right education in order to serve and love well, which is the entire goal of this series, is to help us as faith leaders love better, to love well into the space of substance use disorder. Recently, I did a little math from some folks that were surveyed regarding faith, and the numbers were interesting to me. The survey said that 173 million people identified as Christian. About 7.5 million people in the United States identified as someone practicing the faith of Judaism. 3.5 million identified as Islamic. And then another 1.5 million identified as Hindu. And so when I added all of those up and compared it against the number of people currently dealing with substance use issues in our country, which is 20 million people, I came to this conclusion that there are 9 people of faith per person who is dealing with substance use disorder. If we could mobilize just a portion of that 9 folks per person, what a difference that we could make. And so that helps us to come back to why faith? Why faith? Because we can make a huge difference. And so what we hope to do with these master classes is this. We hope to help us to remember that we've all been called, regardless of doctrine, regardless of theology, to loving our neighbor. And what we hope to do with this is to show you ways to love well and to show the impact that we can make on substance use issues here in this community and in the country.